everybody. Welcome to another episode of What a Hell of a Way to Die. It is me. It is Nate. Nate on the cusp of returning to the homeland, to the motherland, to the bosom embrace of being worried about getting a small infection or breaking a finger because it might bankrupt you. So, Nate, how are you doing?
Doing well, yeah. I'm not returning permanently by any means, but yes, my wife and I are making a trip back to the U.S. to see friends and family. And yeah, my throat's a little sore today, and I'm like, God, I hope I'm not getting sick, because that's the whole point of moving here, was to avoid this shit. But yeah, it's a lovely day. It's extremely gray and kind of cold and kind of windy. It's normal autumn weather here, and I'd be lying if I said I wasn't looking forward to, being back in New York, getting a disgusting bacon, egg, and cheese, being back in Indiana, petting my parents' dogs. But other than that, it's a normal week in the life of a podcaster, I suppose.
So we've got a couple of announcements that we want to do at the top here. So if you've been skipping over the back end of everything, which totally understand because I do that as well, we have the shop open. You can go to ahellofawaytodie.com. And you can see our store. Mostly it's just patches and magnets right now, which I think is what we're going to do because I don't want to fuck around with t-shirt sizes and having different sizes and having weird sizes and then having to deal with, V-necks and loose fits and boyfriend cuts or whatever. So patches. And recently we have our Motrin and Water has now been put onto a patch, and nobody gave me shit like Teespring did, where they printed like 5 and they're like, oh wait, this is actually a trademark. So the company that I use that makes patches has already printed them. So I have 200 of those, and they are up on the store. Go get those. Those are $7 a piece. All the patches are $7 a piece. And that's how we kind of run those. Also, I was recently on an episode of a local podcast called STL Speaks, and you can find that at stlspeaks.com. I believe if it's not there, it'll be in the show notes. But that's a local. It's produced by a local historian, and it is interviewed by a gentleman named Umar Lee, who is a local St. Louis fixture, though he kind of spends a lot of his time down in Dallas with family right now. And we talked St. Louis stuff, but we also, Umar is Muslim, and he spent a lot of time studying abroad in various Muslim countries. So we kind of talked about that, deployments, what we learn as soldiers versus, what he learns as like somebody who actually studies Islam. And it was a lot of fun. It was a good interview. Umar's a good dude. Who's had a lot of rough times in his past, especially in St. Louis, and I won't get into him here, but it was a lot of fun to be on that. So, but Nate, we're here to talk about more military fuck ups, and goddamn, Nate, when you joined, what was the motto when you signed on the dotted line?
It was an army of one, but I remember being 16 years old when Army of One debuted, because previous to that it was Be All You Can Be. And I remember one of my dad's friends, who was like an active duty E8, was in Indianapolis for something back when there was a base there, and he stayed with us. And he asked me, he's like, come on, man, you're at the age where they're starting to like try to recruit you. So let me ask you, what does this mean? Does this mean anything, like an Army of One? And I was like, I very honest, 15-year-old kid, I'd be like, no, not really. I mean, like, I don't understand what it means, and I don't really care. But yeah, yet I somehow joined under an Army of One slogan. And then while I was in ROTC, maybe I think my last year before I commissioned was when they debuted Army Strong. So Be All That You Can Be started in like 82, I think, 83, something like that. And that lasted 1980. 1980. Wow, geez. So that lasted like easily 19 years. And then they had an Army of One, and that lasted, I think, 7 or 8 years, and they transitioned to Army Strong, which has lasted all this time, and now it's some new shit.
Yeah, so I, myself, was being all that I can be, and I still have a key lanyard that I wear to this day. I've had to swap it out because my original one is gross and disgusting, but it does say Be All That You Can Be. And I mean, that shit worked on me because, I was 17 and fucking stupid as shit. But, that one makes sense. And if you look at the history of slogans for the United States Army, and specifically like recruiting slogans, we started in World War I with "I want you" for the Army. Then from the 50s to the 70s was "Choice Not Chance," Modern Army Green, and then 71 to 80 was "Today's Army Want You," and then 80 to 2001, "Be All That You Can Be." So like these things last like a generation or so. And it's really only now that we keep having this weird flail to see what is it going to be that makes people want to join the military. And goddamn, if we haven't come with the most bonkers fucking thing I've heard yet, which is, what's your warrior? Nate, just that phrase makes my brain turn inside out because it makes no fucking sense.
Yeah, what do you mean, what's your warrior?
Right. So, and here's the thing. These slogans should be self-explanatory, right? Like, "Be all that you can be" makes fucking sense. It's like, what do you want to be? You can be all of that. The idea of that slogan is that the military is here to help you become more than what you thought you could be. You can be all that you can be. Makes fucking sense. It's fantastic. I love it. And that's not just because that's what I was recruited under. Like that honestly, it just is a phrase that makes sense to me.
But there was also the thing recently about Warriors Wanted, and I'm like, as much as the stupid warrior shit bothers me, like it's just a dumb. I feel like it appeals to the wrong kind of sensibility, given like what I think if you're going to have a military, it should focus on. But at least in the context of warrior being this dumb shit that gets put in everything involving fitness or challenge or anything along those lines, it sort of makes sense why they would appropriate that. But what's your warrior? I'm just confused. Like, that reminds me of the city of Seoul, South Korea, announced their recent rebranding and slogan. And previously it was, okay, don't get me wrong. They love to do this in Korea. They love to have English slogans that make no sense and then attribute them to some sort of like deeper meaning. But the previous slogan for Seoul had been "Hi Seoul," and then it was like HI, like saying hi, and then it was "the soul of Asia." But their most recent slogan, and this may have changed, but I remember when the most recent slogan was debuted, it was "I.soul.u," and it means nothing. I have no idea what the fuck it's supposed to mean. And there, of course, was this whole thing where they're like, "Oh no, actually it has this deeper meaning. It makes reference to something in Korean culture." But then why is it in English? Like I said, it was insane. But I guess the point I'm making here is more that whenever these things happen, there's always going to be some retroactive sort of justification where people say, no, there's this deep meaning to it. Like it actually, it makes sense. But this sounds to me like the Army just got fucking hoodwinked by a marketing agency the way they always do.
Yeah. So the idea is that, Warriors Wanted, like you said, it's hey, do you like to shoot shit in the face? Come on over to the U.S. Army. We fucking do that shit all the time. Which, makes sense as a, from a marketing standpoint. And we've been shooting people in the face, for the last 18 years in an ineffective war, which does nothing, accomplishes nothing, and will just turn into a heap, a puddle at the end of it. But now the idea, and see, this is the thing, I had to go into this Army Times article that we'll post up in the show notes about what the fuck they're trying to say here. Because "what's your warrior" is a phrase that does not make sense. Grammatically, it doesn't work. Like that doesn't mean anything. Just philosophically, "what's your warrior" is a question that's like one of those questions. That's like, how many angels can dance on the head of a pin kind of question, where it's just like, people try to pretend like it's a deep philosophical question, but in reality, it's just fucking stupid. And it's like nothing. None of these things exist. None of angels don't exist. Heads of pins don't exist. I don't give a fuck. This doesn't make any sense. So, what's your warrior? The idea is to move from this whole Warriors Wanted because we don't want to really be showcasing completely just the combat MOSs. The idea is that like now it's like, well, what is a warrior? What is a warrior to you? You can be a warrior too. You 92 golfs, you 68 whiskeys, you cooks and you medics. You're warriors too. What is your warrior? What is a warrior to you? And again, you shouldn't have to explain a slogan. Like, this is when you say hoodwinked by a marketing firm, holy fuck, are you right? Because What's Your Warrior cost us $4 billion, a $4 billion with a B contract with a Chicago-based contracting firm who you goddamn know everybody's favorite and absolutely not shady, crooked, fucked up Mayor Rahm Emanuel was praising, because it's just, pumping federal dollars into a marketing agency in Chicago so that they can pay more tax dollars or whatever. It is absolutely insane. And I thought, like, wow, I can't believe that we're doing this, but fucking Army Strong costs us $1 billion. It's like we keep changing these advertising firms to come up with this dumb shit that makes no sense. Like, Army of One made no sense because, and the reason they had to look it up, had to see what the fuck they were going for to figure this out, because I read an article in from was it 2006 or so when they transitioned over to Army Strong. They're like, well, Army of One, the whole idea was that kids back in the day were worried that the military has this, like, you lose your individuality. So we wanted to make it so that no, you are an individual. You do get to remain an individual. And I don't know if you remember the commercials for Army of One. It was fucking ridiculous. It was like this voiceover of Army of One while some jack dude, like, not wearing body armor, not wearing a Kevlar helmet, but wearing a rucksack and and carrying a rifle and wearing boots, just ran across the desert by himself. And they're just like, Army of One, you can, but you're part of a team, but you're this. It's like, but none of this is saying anything. That
was actually a preview of the gear you would be wearing during the invasion of Iraq. 4 years later, they were prescient in that regard. Yeah, man. I mean, to be honest with you, it is always very strange, and I think you've got a good point here that the idea that a slogan isn't self-evidently obvious, like a slogan is going to require a deeper understanding, makes it seem really, really dumb. I mean, I remember Army Strong, I at least understand it, but I do recall people kind of taking I was about to say taking the piss like a British person, but basically making fun of it or taking like a cynical view of it, saying that if you didn't know the context behind the ads, you could look at Army Strong and be like, they're speaking in caveman talk, like Army Strong. But obviously that's not the intended interpretation. I think about this though, this just seems very markety, like marketingese. They found a way to get impress the people who make the decisions in these situations, and as such, now they're spending a ton of money on it. But I think that this hinges on the idea that the right kind of sexed up approach is going to make serving in the military appealing to people at a time when, I don't know, like there isn't really a lot to recommend to military life. Like, let's be perfectly honest. For one, we've talked about this before on the show, but in places like, for example, in Seattle or in Washington State, where the minimum wage has gone up to $15 an hour, a person working full-time with full-time hours will make more than a private in the military would make, or an E1 in the military would make. Secondly, obviously, the war continues to go on, and it's shitty, and people are still dying, and people are still killing people abroad, even even in places where we thought we would be done by now, like Afghanistan. The Department of Defense is registering an extremely large number of active duty military suicides. There's a lot more ways of people of getting, sort of the down low on what to expect in the military now from various things like social media and just reporting shows like ours, etc. So in a way, it's not as though these people are, they just need to be exposed to the right tagline, and that's somehow going to, blow their minds and convince them to join the military. It's that the military's got such a negative and deservedly negative reputation right now because of what's going on, geopolitically, but also what's going on in terms of quality of life in the ranks. And they're basically, there's a lot of money changing hands, and a lot of people thinking, okay, if we just, sex it up enough and appeal to Gen Z the right way, that they're going to turn around and be like, actually, the military is great and we all want to join. And I just feel as though this is that $4 billion could have fixed all the water problems in Flint and then some. But instead, it's like, nope, going to try to convince some kids to get killed so they can buy Camaros. The end.
Yeah, so from the Army Times article, this is all interviews with Brigadier General Alex Fink, who's the chief of the Army Enterprise Marketing, which is an MOS I didn't fucking realize existed. Like, I thought I was the propaganda machine, but apparently not. So, while the campaign is not yet launched, Fink gave Army Times an early look of one of the copies of the print ad. It depicts actual U.S. soldiers from 5 different career paths: a lab tech, a signals troop, an aviator, a cyber operator, and a sniper qualified soldier. These types of roles can be difficult to fill. These particular MOSs featured here are indeed the top ones we need, Fink said, but not necessarily why we chose them. The soldiers were chosen for the ads because the marketing team wants to expose Generation Z to a variety of options. We want to surprise them, Fink says. Everything from the colors to the music used in the ads will be intended to key an audience into what Army Enterprise Marketing hopes will be a strikingly different campaign than the last ones. I have to say, I am very interested because, I mean, every military commercial in the last, as long as I can remember, honestly, is, what are you fuckers doing? Sitting on the couch, fucking beating your dicks. Why don't you go kill some people for God and country? Like the Navy with playing God. What music did they? Just some goofy ass let the bodies hit the floor or some shit like that. While they're doing action shots of like rib boats coming out of destroyers and just like, oh, we're gonna go do some shit. We're gonna go attack this beachhead. Yeah, it's gonna be fucking awesome. And I am very interested to see where this one goes, where you say the colors and the music, because I don't know what's going to attract Gen Z. And I talk to Gen Z people. I talk to, there's people I follow on Twitter who are in their early 20s who are this like target demographic. And I don't know if this, now granted, I follow a lot of, fucking communists and socialists and shit posters. So I don't exactly have my finger on the pulse of Generation Z, but I'm confused as to what music and what colors are like. Are we going to kind of do a retro thing? Are we going to do like a lab tech and pastels and listening to the Smiths, How Soon Is Now? Because for everything that I remember, everything I know about Gen Z is they're just like full of ennui and they all want to die, which is like, sounds like the perfect slogan for the military. Perfect. Like, oh, you want to die? Fucking join the army, bitch.
Yeah, if you want to die, we have lots and lots of ways that are proven to allow you to get there. I think that. So I also think that there's a kind of an element to which I'm sure they've done the research, right? I'm sure they've done focus grouping, they've done polling and things along those lines. But I think that when it comes down to the way that it winds up getting packaged up and sold, I'm sure there's a kind of like hand moving the Ouija board kind of thing, in the sense that there's obviously these institutional expectations, and any good marketing agency has figured out what their clients want to hear, as well as, what they think is going to work. And so in that regard, when I think about my own experience, just when it comes to things like somebody senior ranking in the military trying to get an op-ed published somewhere and how many hands get involved in stirring the pot and trying to like revise it, I can only imagine for this that this is probably not given, let's just say, total creative freedom, what a competent marketing agency would have come up with. This is what they came up with that was able to pass muster. So what I'm saying is, this is like the episode of The Simpsons where Homer gets to design the car. The Homer is what this marketing agency has come up with. This is what, after all of the chiefs have weighed in, this is what they've got, and it's not good.
And just to use a different reference, for me, as somebody posted to me on Twitter when I was ranting about this is the Rick and Morty episode where the dad is in the fantasy marketing world, and he just comes up with the apple, like for literal apples, it just says "hungry for apples," and everybody just applauds him, and he's just like, but it's like a figment of his own imagination. It's not really happening, but everybody's just like, yeah, hungry for apples. It's fucking brilliant.
Yeah, I actually haven't watched Rick and Morty because my brain isn't powerful enough to comprehend it. I recognize that it's on a completely different plane of artistic license and creativity, so I appreciate you breaking that down for me, but I'm never going to actually watch it because I don't think I could handle it.
Nate, Rick and Morty is good. Just don't don't listen to the fandom. The biggest problem with Rick and Morty is not that the show is bad, because the show is funny, but it's that people take it too seriously, and they think that they are either a Rick or a Morty, and it's like, no, you guys, this is made up. This is some stupid bullshit. Stop it. It's people who are really into Rick and Morty are on the same level as people who get their political analysis from Harry Potter. Anyway, that's just where I stand with that. And so another thing from this article, the new ads are focused on Generation Z, or those born after 1996, is a cohort of young people who are seeking a larger purpose and narrative in life, according to Army leadership involved in the service's recruiting push. This generation, as opposed to other generations, is a shift. They want to serve something bigger than themselves, as Sergeant Major of the Army Michael Grinston said in September. It might surprise you a bit. I'm confused here, because when Generation Z says that they want to serve something bigger than them, it's because Generation Z is worried about the Earth catching on fire. The Army is not the way to go with that. We are literally
you want to help
largest
the world.
polluters.
I was gonna say, you want to improve the world? You want to do something bigger than yourself? Why don't you join the world's biggest consumer of fossil fuels, the world's biggest polluter? You too can help enforce militarized borders around the world. And guess what? Your commander-in-chief shits on a golden toilet and is senile. That doesn't sound like based on, granted, I also skewed left in terms of the Gen Z people I encounter, but I don't think that's something that's going to just immediately ring a bell amongst people that age, and they're like, yes, I'm tired of the creature comforts of toilets that work. I'm tired of the creature comforts of having walls that aren't covered in black mold. I want to live in a shitty, lowest bidder barracks built on Fort Bragg with horrible Bush administration money. I want to go and enforce the border in Syria or something. Who even fucking knows anymore? What am I doing? Are we going to enforce a border in Syria? Are we helping Turkey? Are we at war with Turkey? I don't know. I want to look at memes on TikTok. I'm an army of one.
Continuing on, finding out how to tap into that sentiment among Generation Z could prove challenging for the service, though, as it works to meet bold recruiting goals year after year to grow to a 500,000 strong active duty force by the end of the next decade. I don't see that happening. As you said, life is too good for everybody, even with, rubber baby senile, president. Things are going too well for everybody. And I swear, if we get Medicare for all, or if we get some kind of universal health care, and on top of that, manage to make public universities free, the Army is done at that point. Or it's just going to turn so radically right wing that it's gonna the only people who are gonna join are people who are honestly
gain skills for the outside world, like murdering people, which you want to do in Identity Evropa, your militia. Don't worry, your platoon leader is probably a member already. There's an extent to which, I think about that. I also think that, unemployment is very low in America, but obviously wage growth hasn't kept up with it, and obviously medical debt, student loan debt is so tremendous that you have this untenable situation. But I think the thing about it is not necessarily the benefits the military offers are not registering to people. I think people are aware that they can get free healthcare, and they can get free healthcare for their families, and they can get education benefits and all these things. It's just that they're also weighing the risks, right? They're weighing the risks and saying it's not worth it to me. Also, I think one of the things that really we need to talk about more in general, both us on the show, but also just in general in America, is the extent to which this stuff is all predicated on the idea that the military will allow you to join. And what I mean by that is, if you're disabled, or if, the cops banged you up with some bullshit charge when you were young and now you can't join, you basically will never be able to. And, and you think about people who live, Cynthia's told me stories about living in her neighborhood where teenage boys, the cops would rough them up on the street and be like, if I ever see you on the street again, you're going to fucking jail. And they'd be like, but officer, this is my street and I live on it. They're like, I don't fucking care. Don't let me catch you around here again. That kind of shit happening is you imagine if that's what you're experiencing starting from age 10 onward, you're probably going to catch a bullshit charge for some reason. Because clearly, if we've learned anything in the last couple of years, the cops in America are a white nationalist gang who can do whatever the fuck they want. And so the idea is, can you join? Well, I don't know. Are you physically able to? Are you not? Do you have disabilities that exclude you from military service? Do you have a criminal record that excludes you from military service? Do you have medical issues due to lack of good, accessible public health care that could have been treated and could have allowed you to join, but now you can't? So in a way, it's I think that's one of the focus in some of these things is that the military, people talk about like, oh, well, if you want these things, you should join the military. And that's a dumb reactionary line that you hear people deploying all the time. And the fact is, we don't want this weird Praetorian world in which the only way you can have a decent standard of living is to go potentially die in fucking bullshit conflicts, that are either legacy continuations of terrible oil executive decisions made in the last decade, or worse, just dumb ideas to create fail states because, Hillary Clinton thought it would be awesome to kill Muammar Gaddafi. Like, you see where I'm getting at with this stuff. Like, we want to build something that's inclusive of everyone, and I would be very happy if military recruitment suffers because they can't recruit people because no longer do people have to go into debt for medical care or for high schools, university or trade school or things along those lines. But I also think that this idea that you're not cutting through because people don't know how awesome it is or people don't know what kind of benefits they get. I feel like my experience, and Twitter's not real life, but my experience is that folks are pretty well aware that you can get that stuff. It's just not a decision. It's not a trade-off they're willing to make.
Yeah. In the book, Starship Troopers by Robert Heinlein, which I know is a super fast book, don't yell at me, but there was one in which Johnny Rico's talking to his recruiter, and he's just like, well, what happens if you get somebody who can't serve? And the recruiter, because, to be able to vote and to be able to have franchises and stuff in the Starship Trooper universe, you have to serve the government in one form or another. You have to do federal service. And they're like, look, if somebody came in here, deaf, dumb, blind, in a wheelchair, and wanted to become a citizen, we would get that person to count fuzzy caterpillars with their fingers for 2 years. Like, we will find something for everybody. We don't deny anybody. And unfortunately, that's what the military, it's like you said, there's people who cannot be in the military because of, various reasons. And we have no way of, like creating that opening for them.
Yeah, well, I think about that too sometimes, that there's an extent to which my end goal here isn't, okay, wouldn't it be nice if everyone in America could serve in the military? I want the exact opposite of that. I think that you can make a case for, if you repurpose the military to be something like the fire department, that there might be a use for a much more stripped down military, a much smaller military. I mean, but I think the point here is not that I think, damn, wouldn't it be great if the military was all inclusive of everyone, regardless of physical condition, regardless of mental health, regardless of whatever could serve in the military? That's absolutely not my goal. I just think that it's interesting because, you look at some of the net results of things like the cuts to America's very frail welfare state in the 90s, the extent to which, student debt has ballooned and medical debt has ballooned, but wages have stayed the same. You look at the fact that, people in the military, although they're able to access, benefits, there's obviously a lot of much more publicly out there issues with it. Specifically, we've talked a lot on this show about the terrible situation with military housing in some bases and how it's privatized in all but name, and you're getting paid to live. You're basically getting free housing, but that free housing is basically run by a government subsidized slumlord. So, I guess to me, it's like, I think that the look at all the benefits you could possibly get. If that doesn't have purchase, then what are you going to get people interested in? How are you going to get young people, primarily young people who don't know any better, to join? How is that going to work? And the Army seems to have decided that appealing to the sort of like warrior sense of adventure and doing something bigger than yourself is the answer. But my personal take is that it's a lot easier to sell people on the idea that, you're doing something that's bigger than yourself and that means something when they don't have, more or less unfettered access to information showing just how wrong that is. And take aside, obviously, like the leftist argument that we say that these wars have been, imperialist expansion. Take aside that and just look at the track record of the war being successful. Like, we're still fighting in Iraq and Syria. We're still fighting in Afghanistan. None of that's come to a conclusion. I was a dumbass when I was 19 and I signed on the dotted line, but it was also 2004, and it was a lot was different back then versus now. So for now, I just feel as though there's an extent to which they've got to, I don't know, understand that most people aren't going to be swayed by this. And if they are swayed by it, that's either what they're saying to their recruiter and their drill sergeant, or they're extremely inexperienced, and chances are good that they're probably going to be very unhappy once they get in. At least that's my take. It sounds like shit's gotten worse in terms of general morale since I got out, so I can only imagine.
Yeah, there's an interesting quote in here. So Fink, Brigadier General Fink, who spent most of his career in the Army Reserve, often noticed a growing divide in his civilian pursuits. He says, "I had places I worked or clients I worked for where I was the only person they had ever known who served in the military. They revere us, but they don't see us in their consideration set." And I feel like that's everybody right now, because there's this, at this point in time, as we said, been at war in Afghanistan 18 plus years, no ending in sight here. Even, the talking of, I believe Mark Esper was saying, it's like, oh, we could drop it down to 8,000, troops and still manage to keep the country from collapsing on itself. That's still an 8,000 occupational force. So obviously these wars are going to continue on, and I feel like a lot of people are, have that, because in my civilian job as well, and just anything is just like, wow, yeah, you're in the military. That's really cool. I bet that's really tough. I could never do that. And the whole, like, I could never do that is what's really going on in the brain is, man, that fucking sounds stupid. I would never do that shit. Like, nobody wants to, tell the troops to fuck off, obviously. Other than, angry online leftists. But, in the real world, the idea of, like, nobody sees this as a consideration set, it's because nobody wants to fucking do this. It's stupid. Like, and maybe it is the whole warrior class. You need to have, like, your uncle who wears an OIF hat everywhere he goes, and, like, a Marpat backpack or whatever as his normal daily backpack. Maybe you need to have that guy to really convince you to fucking do this shit on a regular basis. But, like, I don't think that, like, the military is everywhere. Like, if you watch sports, they always have a bunch of fucking troops out there with a giant flag, flying F-16s or F-18s or whatever over, flying bombers. Like, oh, hell yeah, it's the Browns game. Let's fucking celebrate the military while we're here. There's constantly, like, recruiting. And this is all, like, stuff that the military pays for. The military pays these sports franchises, gives them money to allow us to do, like, swearing-ins on the field at Cardinal Stadium, which absolutely happened one time, and probably has happened more than one time. So you have, the military is not something strange and different. Like, we fucking talk about the military constantly. The Army is like a cult of worship for for America. So the idea that, like, people don't see us as a consideration set, I don't think people understand. Like it feels like they're trying to say, like, well, we're a very quiet group that nobody really knows that the military is here. When fucking no, we're not. We're everywhere constantly. I recently went to an outlet mall and got to park in the veterans only parking space. Like, holy shit, we are fucking everywhere. It is not a, like, oh, people just don't know about the military. They don't consider us as a set. No one wants to fucking do this because we have shit pay. We have a shit job. You sign up, like, at the age of 18, it's like, all right, finally, I'm an adult. And what happens? They treat you like a child. They treat you like a child for, like, 4 to 5 years until you become a sergeant. And then you have to treat other people like children because guess what? They're all dumb as shit. Every private that's joining is, probably going to be dumb as hell. And even if they're not, you have to assume that they're dumb as hell until they prove to you that they're not. The entirety of the military just sounds on surface level terrible. And as a soldier, it is. So
I think about this. So a friend of mine from middle school and I reconnected when I lived in New York. He and I had both gone to Indiana University together. But we weren't great friends in high school and college, but we were in, like, 6th and 7th grade. We were really good friends. And he was working in finance as an analyst at a hedge fund. And so he had gotten a job in finance in Chicago after college, and then had, gotten various series of jobs, gotten promoted, and then now was working, on what they call the buy side, like, at a fund. And he had a base salary of like $150,000. And then if his team did well in a year, he got a cut of the profits that his team made, of their payout for their gains. That was sort of the incentive in the structure. So he'd had years in the past where he'd made over $1 million. He was my age. We're the same age. And I was thinking about that when I was in the Army, I was like, oh, sweet, badass. I'm an officer. I'm making captain pay and I'm single. Like, this is a ton of money. But you also, coming from Indiana and not growing up in this background, you forget that there are a lot of people who can make a lot more money. And I mean, if finance people deal with shitty hours, but they're not dealing with, beat your face at 6 a.m. on a gravel fucking lot because somebody, got in a motorcycle accident last night and we're mad, so we're going to punish everyone. There's mass punishment in the sense that if your team fucks up, you might all get fired. But there's not mass punishment in the sense of like the stupidity of losing weekends because a soldier broke curfew or a soldier got a DUI, mass punishment in the sense of having your free time taken away, like mass punishment in the sense of just being humiliated because someone's decided that like they need to make a point about like the color of your hat or something along those lines. You can always quit in the civilian world. The idea that like, yeah, people want to be like, oh, I mean, deep down, maybe I could be a Navy SEAL, because what they mean is like the physical challenge, like the toughness, like the having to, be brave in dangerous situations. But nobody wants to deal with, getting screamed at because they didn't fold their bed correctly. And that's the thing I think that people forget, that you can make a hell of a lot more money in the civilian world. I didn't know this. I mean, I was completely oblivious to this. You can make a hell of a lot more money in the civilian world than you can, in the military. And if you're going to put up with dumb bullshit in like these sort of college grad executive style jobs, and not even executive, but like white collar jobs, if you can crack into that world, I mean, you're going to put up with bullshit, but none of it's going to be anywhere near as dumb as the bullshit you put up with in the Army. The funny thing for me is that I had a white collar job when I was in New York, and I absolutely hated it. Like, I hated the bullshit more because it felt like, I guess in a sense, I think I was a bit of a purist. I thought to myself, wow, I shouldn't have to put up with dumb bullshit anymore. I thought I was done with this. But obviously, like, I'm a spoiled baby because actually, in the grand scheme of things, what you put up with in the civilian world is way, way less. If you're in a white collar job, if you're in a hourly job, in a like service sector job, it's just as humiliating and dumb, and you don't have healthcare. But I guess I think about this sometimes. Like, I really do think that for people who are career military, who are making these decisions, who have, like, they're the ones who are supposed to interpret the data that pollsters give them about what these recruits want. I think that especially like a general, like you're describing, even if he spent most of his career in the reserves, he's still going to be really disconnected from what, the average 22-year-old is thinking.
Well, and to your point about all the dumb bullshit, that's not really surface level stuff that other people know. Like, we know it because we're in the military and we experienced it. But your average civilian who's contemplating, what do I do with my career at this point, doesn't, maybe they kind of know about the dumb bullshit, but they don't really know about the dumb bullshit like you, me, and everybody else who signed on the dotted line does. But, still, it's still when you look at the military itself at this point in time and you think like, do I want to join the Army? Oh, we're still at war in Afghanistan? Nah, I don't want to do that anymore. Like, I feel like that's really where we're hurting. And like, the biggest recruitment thing that the military could do to like really bring in Generation Z is stop being in stupid fucking wars. Like, if you want people, stop needing people for this dumb bullshit, because like you said, kids are smart today. And they want to be a part of something bigger than them, sure, but this ain't it, Chief. This ain't it, General. This isn't where it's going to be.
Well, I mean, imagine if they were like, hey, we're repurposing the U.S. Navy to basically do nothing but ocean cleanup. Like, we're just gonna, like, folks would join. We're repurposing the U.S. Army, and we're redeploying people from forward deployed locations back to like parts of the United States or parts of the world that have been fucked up by climate change, and we're like, we're helping to like plant trees and do things to mitigate climate change. Folks would actually really get into that. I mean, obviously, there's an extent to which would people trust it? Would it actually pan out? Would it just be us burning fuel to like have burning fuel in generators to power Toby Keith concerts at like FOBs when they were supposed to be planting trees? I don't know, but I do think that taking this outside of the perspective of the military and something more like a kind of civilian conservation corps / AmeriCorps kind of thing, beefing that stuff up and funding it correctly and giving people that sort of, and giving people the same kind of benefits that you'd get in the military. Like, imagine if you could do something like equivalent to like what AmeriCorps does, or what the CCC did, in the Great Depression. Imagine you could go around doing, like, helping to maintain hiking trails, or like building seawalls and stuff against like tsunamis, or, doing things that can like help, fortify communities against climate change. Imagine if you were doing that, and then when you got done with doing that for 3 years, you got the equivalent of the GI Bill and, like, VA loans and things along those lines. Like, imagine if you repurposed that largesse towards helping America or helping the world, helping combat something like climate change, and you also gave people the social benefits. I mean, frankly, you shouldn't have to do that to earn those social benefits. But I was just saying, imagine, just take for example, whether or not people would be willing, if other circumstances remained the same, and it was just do CCC stuff instead of doing imperialism, and you got the same benefits. I think it would be an incredibly popular thing. Obviously, what would make it even better is if you didn't have to do that to get basic healthcare and education. I want to emphasize that's what I actually want. But I'm saying, if the argument is, people don't want to put up with the hardship, people don't want to put up with, like, the physical challenges, people, I think you really need to separate those physical challenges, the hardship, the isolation, like the austerity, from doing imperialism. Like, or breaking your body down to do fucking bullshit training exercises because they want to test out, like, a cool, like, a weird counter IED device that launches Nerf balls at people when they think they're looking at you threateningly. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I feel as though to your point, they are failing to consider the anti-recruitment effect of 18 years of endless war.
Yeah, imagine if the Army was saying, hey, join the Army, we will train you as a plumber or a carpenter or a mason or a welder. We'll give you, a year or two of training to be a part of this. Rather than ROTC, you go to, some sort of like government funded trade school, and then you go and you do those things around, the country or around the world. Like, hey, these places, their infrastructure is falling apart. Well, we're going to send these tradespeople who are trained by the military, trained by the federal government to go do these things. And then when you get out, hey, you've got a trade. Or if you want to go to college on the GI Bill, or if you want to, do something else with your life, you can. But, how great would it be if everybody who wanted to, who could join the military, could come out after like 3 to 5 years with a trade under their belt. You're in your mid-20s. You can go join a union. You can open up your own private, whatever, like just fixing stuff for people. Or you can stay in and continue to help around the world. But instead of that, what we're going to do is just drop fucking bombs on people.
It's funny because I'm not trying to do the weird revisionist thing where you basically say that everything the Soviet Union did was good, because obviously, like, we understand that that's a really ahistorical conception of the world. I just will say this: remove it entirely from the context of Soviet imperialism, which absolutely was a thing. Remove that entirely. A friend of my mom's, when I was growing up in Indiana, he died later on from, I think he had a heart attack when he was in his 60s, because he was a very, very heavy drinker and smoker. But he was a Jewish Russian who left the Soviet Union, I think in the late 80s, early 90s, when they were letting Jewish citizens emigrate. But he had grown up in the Soviet Union, in the Ukrainian SSR, and had been drafted in the Soviet military and had become a carpenter. And then in the US, he ran a carpentry home remodeling business. And he told me that during his military service, that's exactly what he did. They were building housing, both like military and civilian housing, in some of the other Soviet socialist republics in the USSR. So he spent time in Kyrgyzstan and Turkmenistan and places like that building housing. And that's where he learned his trade. Now, I'm not saying we should emulate the Soviet Union, because, I mean, if you know anything about the history of Central Asia and the Soviet Union, those areas were basically annexed by the Russian Empire in the 19th century. And a lot of those countries, like what the Soviet Union was helping to do was sort of like forced Russification of those countries. What I'm trying to say is, take out the damn imperialism. It's a big point we're trying to make here. And just think about, what if we wanted to build housing, and instead of saying, we'll just delegate it to the free market, we actually built it ourselves? And what if that was done in a way that the money being spent on it wasn't going to pay insane executive bonuses like the ones that were being paid to those people at Sallie Mae who got an all expenses paid trip to Hawaii to celebrate student loan debt? What if instead the money going into that was going solely to build these things for people to have guaranteed housing, and then the money they were paying in rent or whatever, if rent exists, was only going in like to maintain those units or like to help like the local council authorities and things along those lines. Imagine if there were no such thing as fucking landlords. Imagine if you didn't have to pay disposable income, post-tax income to some asshole to be rich because he owns the land you live on. Like, wouldn't that be amazing? Wouldn't it be amazing if we could build housing like we desperately need in certain parts of this country, and it was being done in a way that wasn't exploitative and that wasn't feeding into some insane fucking plutocrat's nightmare portfolio? That would be awesome. I think that would be amazing.
So, Nate, before we jump into our bonus episode, I do want to go over some of the previous slogans. So, World War I up to about World War II was "I want you for the U.S. Army," which is that Uncle Sam, Uncle Sam knife handing you or finger pointing you. 1950s to 1971, choice not chance.
So basically, don't get drafted.
Well, the idea was just like, look, if we draft you, we're going to put you wherever the fuck we want. But
you're going to be in the 420th toilet cleaning brigade, or you can join voluntarily.
Right, and you can be part of the 69th toilet cleaning brigade. The 1971 to 1988, today's Army wants to join you, which sounds really weirdly sexual.
I mean, things were weird back then, so yeah, let's just go with it.
I mean, and this is still draft years too, so it's
I guess what were the years?
1971, wasn't there still draft during 1971?
Yeah, 73 was when they got rid of the draft.
Yeah, so 1971 to 1980 was today's Army wants to join you. There was a recruiting slogan from the 1971 Volunteer Army campaign, which was introduced as the country prepared to transition to an all-volunteer army. So I guess they knew that the draft was ending soon. But
you know what wasn't ending soon? The war in Vietnam.
The slogan was replaced by "Join people who have joined the army" in 1973, which later evolved into "This is the Army."
Yeah,
sure.
There was a slogan briefly. I know that it wasn't an official tagline, but it was we get more done by 6 a.m. than most people do all day. That was legitimately a slogan. That was like an ad. So similarly, there was an ad in the Marine Corps in the 80s where it was just a drill sergeant screaming at a dude's face, and it said, "We never promised you a bed of roses."
See, this stuff would work now, I think.
It would fucking rule, I know.
The Marines One should bring back "Never Promised You a Bed of Roses," and then you get to fight the lava demon with the sword that nobody gets.
Yes, fight a dragon with a goddamn sword. Why the fuck does the Marine Corps not let people do that? They have the dragon. They clearly have the dragon.
There's also a great National Guard commercial from the 1980s where like a guy is sitting watching TV, and then like a National Guard commercial comes in and he gets like sucked into the TV, which was like a big thing in the 80s, was to like get sucked into your television. I think MTV had used that graphic a lot of getting sucked into a music video or something. And it's basically like you're sitting on your couch and then all of a sudden you get sucked in and you're sandbagging somewhere where it's raining, and just like, and the guy's just like, "Oh God, well I better sandbag this shit." And I was like, God, that would fucking suck. Like you're just sitting, chilling.
Imagine if the danger... If the danger of watching TV was at any moment you could get sucked in and forcibly drafted, it's like, damn, do I live in North Korea? It's like basically, yeah, this is you want to live out the dream. Well, the TV can conscript you whenever it wants. So
yeah,
be cautious when you turn that thing on.
It's The Ring, but for the army. So instead of like a wet Japanese demon, it's like a drill sergeant that sucks you in. It's just like, hey, guess what, bitch? You're stacking sandbags. All right, 1980 to 2001, Be All That You Can Be. As we said, I think the only one that makes sense. 2001 to 2006, Army of One, as we discussed. 2006 to 2018, Army Strong, which for us, because the slogan was "There's strong and then there's Army strong," which of course we turned it into "There's wrong and then there's Army wrong." 2018 to present, Warriors Wanted, and then now, What's Your Warrior? Which also implies that there might be questions of how is your warrior, where is your warrior, why is your warrior?
Philosophically, Army, you know what I mean?
I'm into it. Like the 5 W's that as public affairs, that's what we have to ask. So if we're going to ask what's your warrior, we have to ask where is your warrior, and that is the question on every sergeant's mind at 2:00 in the morning on a Saturday. Where is your warrior? Oh fuck, he's fucking in prison again. Got to go bail his ass out. Brock and I are discussing another video game, the fantastic, wonderful, insane Katamari Damacy, which if you don't know, yes, we're gonna decide whether or not it's fascist. I haven't recorded it yet, but I am going to bring up the idea of the Katamari death cult. Which I believe would be an absolutely a thing that would happen. Somehow we are going to manage to pull like 40 to 60 minutes out of a game in which you just roll shit up while your dad disapprovingly looks down from the sky, which I think is something that every soldier can identify with. So $5 a month, get up on that. That is me and Brock. Brock and I have talked about a lot of video games. Brock is he's a Missouri boy too, so I always enjoy having him on. So get up on the Patreon, patreon.com/hellofaWayToDie, and here is a preview. It was just like, I wanted to make a fun game that was fun, that was easy to pick up, enjoyable to play, and there's like literally nothing else. Like, you know, you and me will breathe our, like, this is about, you know, the Prince's capitalism, you know, just sucking up the hard work and the labor of everybody else. But also you could be like, well, the Prince is doing a favor because, like, who the fuck left all these thumbtacks everywhere? Somebody's got to clean that shit up.
Right. Yeah, it's a story about how a collective comes together and how, it certainly doesn't exist devoid of meaning. And one of the things that the book gets into is sort of how the creator of the game went through all these different art schools and various art programs and different media, from like sculpture to like painting to like eventually settling in video games and stuff. And everywhere he went, he was just sort of trying to like capture life and experience and objects. And every time he tried to do so, he's like, you know what? This medium doesn't capture it quite right, which is why one of the things about the game is that there's like a million different objects and creatures and things like that in here. And they're all rendered in this very minimalist style that makes interesting choices about what you would see that would define that makes something an elephant versus what you see that makes something a chair. And it's these very odd choices that you're like, well, my brain identifies that as a chair, but it looks weird, right? There's something very funny about it. And so there is meaning behind all of it and the choices that are made, because especially like at the time that it was released, despite how like minimalist it is, the game basically was crashing the PS2 because it just had so much in there. So they were well, how do we fix this? Like, well, we pull back on the specifics and the detail, and it makes it better.
Yeah, it's minimalist because the PS2 just couldn't handle the amount of shit that is in it, like individual things that keep getting picked up. But they kind of, you know, the way that they worked around that was kind of interesting because, like, you know, you start rolling up thumbtacks and you end up, you know, at the end you're rolling up city blocks. But like that thumbtack is not in there anymore. Like it's just, you know, when you talked about like losing things, right. The PS2 couldn't handle you losing things. Like you can run into something and like things fly off of your Katamari, but right. You can go roll them back up, but you don't lose size. Like you never like lose so much stuff that like your thing goes down. Or you know what? Actually, in the new one, I think you do just a little bit. In the remaster, because I did notice that I started running into stuff just to see what would happen, and it did seem like I lost a little bit of Katamari weight there. But you know, eventually when you get bigger, like, you know, the cat that you rolled up, you know, 10 minutes ago is no longer technically in there. It's just now this big mass, and you're no longer when you're large enough and you're rolling up a building, you're not picking up, you know, cats and mice and bicycles anymore. You're just picking up a street. Like, or an entire guardrail or something like that. So it is a interesting, like, the technical limitations of the time, you know, because now you have all the processing power you need, right? You can make Katamari and you can make everything. You can make like a really high definition Katamari Damacy where everything is like down to the pixel, and you know, grab everything, and you know, you need 16 gigabytes of RAM to run the damn thing. But the minimalism, you know, is really adds to it, I guess. Like everything about it, like every design choice, from the way things look, the way things react, the way things interact, and the music and the controls. It was like, and reading Ellie's book, you can see that these were deliberate. Like they had to work inside of a constraint, but it wasn't like, well, we can't do it now because, I can't do this one thing. It's like, okay, well, how can we do this? So if we just make everything kind of, boxy polygon with bright colors, and then we just call it a thing when you roll it up, give it a name for whatever it is, then it works. And it does. The whole thing, like, as you play, like, I've never heard anybody say an unkind word about Katamari. Like, either people...
Why would you?
Right. People either love it or they've never played it. Like, those are the two things. I can see people saying, okay, I'm not into this. I play Fortnite or I play shooters. Like, I don't know if I could, sit my 17, my nephews probably would love it. I mean, because they love indie games, and they love things they love storytelling games, or they like games that are like outside of the box. So, and this is way outside of the box.
There's nothing here that doesn't appeal to people in the exact same way that there's a universal appeal across all ages and all interests to something like Untitled Goose Game. They're very much the same game. It's causing anarchy in a world. And it's silly, and there's maybe one button, and everyone can just see. You can watch somebody play 30 seconds of it, or see a GIF of it, and inherently know why it is interesting and why it would be fun for you to play.
Exactly, and that is like, in a world where everybody wants to. I mean, it's like beer. There's 7 beers, and everybody just keeps everybody keeps recreating the 7 beers. In a world where where gaming is at the time was, really, you made games for these consoles, or you didn't make games. Maybe you made PC games. Because I'm not trying to say that indie gaming didn't exist in 2004, but like I said, it didn't exist in the way that we have now. You didn't get the funding the way that you had now. You couldn't really couldn't make a game for $50,000 in 2004.
Well, the excellent arc of like
you didn't have a way to like get it out to everybody. Like, I made this game. Click here. You can download it and play it, and see if you like it, and tell me if I should make changes to it.
The arc of like game development has always been interesting, because in like the early 80s, it was one guy alone in his basement, and then it had to be games that like there were 2 or 3 people involved. And then pretty quickly we jumped to teams of 20, and then teams of 100, and then teams of several hundred. And it wasn't until like the early 2000s, mid 2000s, around this time, that the tools even began to exist, or these same systems that you're talking about, like internet being fast enough, there being a place to find it, there being a way of paying somebody, distribution networks like Steam, that we could actually go back into a place where there were teams that like the paths could diverge, and you could have a team of 10 people make a game again, and then down to like 2 or 3. Like you've got like, by the time that like the Super Meat Boy guys are making their game, or the people that you see in Indie Game the movie in like 2007, 2008, you're like, okay, so that's when the production like comes back into such a way that you can do it. And now like, you can make a game on your cell phone, and like if you seize the means of production is what I'm getting at. But it is an interesting arc in that way, that there was like 2 decades in there that like, if you wanted to make a video game, you could not. But like on both ends of that bell curve, you could.
Right. And, it's, as you said, in the 80s, you distributed it to your other, friends who were lucky enough to have computers. In the 90s, I was playing X-Wing versus TIE Fighter, and, and Dark Forces and LucasArts games. And, they don't make, I don't mean to sound like a fucking old ass fuddy-duddy, but they don't make games like that anymore, Brock. Now everything, like, I saw somebody saying like, oh, we should get like a new X-Wing versus TIE Fighter. I'm like, have you seen space sim games right now? They're fucking complicated. Like, I can't remember, somebody told me to buy this one game where it's like it's a space sim game, and they're like, oh, if you like X-Wing versus TIE Fighter, you'll like this. But it's just like, if you come to this this docking station the wrong way, and you have this gun out, they're going to think you're attacking them. So you have to hit this button to put your gun away. You have to hit this button to hail them. You have to hit that button to accept it. It's like, look, whoa. I just want to fucking shoot stuff, man. I don't need all this. Like, I want to fly around and blow up TIE
in
fighters.
A box here how many buttons there were in X-Wing, which it turns out on Revisit
there was a lot.
To
be fair, there were a lot of buttons in it. There were a lot of buttons in X-Wing. Look, I knew those buttons though, and that's what mattered.
Yeah,
I don't want to learn.
This
new
is where
buttons.
you're a fuddy-duddy.
Right. I don't want to learn new buttons. I just want to play X-Wing versus TIE Fighter.
So, just FYI for everybody, if you're not of the age cohort that got into Katamari Damacy, I'm just going to say this. One of the best things about that game, two things. Number one, all of the songs in the soundtrack have lyrics about rolling things up. It's the weirdest thing, but basically, like, because you run around rolling up stuff and making a ball of even larger mass, with each successive level, they've created like basically what I might describe as sort of like kind of generic pop songs, but they're all about rolling things up. And it's the weirdest thing they're in English, if you pay attention to them, how insane the lyrics are and how much detail they went into. And also probably one of the best things about it is that some of the sound effects things make when you roll them up. You may not know this if you haven't played the game towards the end, but when you get to the point where you're rolling up like entire apartment complexes of things into your huge ball, there are times in which they will make this strange noise. And the best way to describe it is it sounds like an opera singer in the building singing, "Oh my God, no." And it's fucking amazing. Like, it's absolutely unbelievable. So I'm just telling you, I had my mind blown completely by Katamari Damacy when it came out. To me, it's one of the best games ever made. So hopefully you get on the Patreon, you pay for that sweet bonus content. But also, if you haven't played that game before, take it from me, the usual not gaming member of this show, play Katamari Damacy. It's amazing.
It's on Steam. Like, they Katamari Reroll, they remastered it and put it on Steam for $15. I immediately went out and bought it. And yeah, to your thing about the soundtrack, there's on the We Heart Katamari, which was the sequel to it, which incredible that they made a sequel in which it's basically just like the King of All Cosmos is like, I fucked up again and deleted the universe, so do everything again. And also this time it's just in different places and there's new things to roll up. But there's a whole lounge, like a lounge Katamari version, and it's phenomenal. And it's the one it plays on repeat because there's one there of different like lengths and whatnot about how much time you have to roll stuff up. So there's one that you get 18 minutes, and it's like you have to roll up everything in the world. And if you get big enough, you can roll up the King of All Cosmos. And it's just this lounge song repeatedly. And it's phenomenal. I love that game so much. It is the game that it's, play it drunk, play it high, play it sober. It's all the same. It's insane, and I love it. So I really wanted to talk to Brock about it. And also, there's an ebook that we're going to discuss in it about somebody who figured out the history, like went into the history of Katamari Damacy. It's
deep lore.
Yes, it's short, but like the way that the guy who originally came up with it, like his thought process into getting to Katamari is just phenomenal at Namco. So definitely check that out. It's a lot of fun. So other than that, thank you all. As we mentioned, we are on the Patreon. You can also catch us on YouTube. You can catch us on Twitter. You can follow me at Army Strang, follow Nate at In These Deserts, follow the podcast, Hell of a Way. We have the shop now, as we mentioned at the top of the episode. We've got all kinds of ways to just get that content directly into you. We're on Facebook, we're on YouTube, we're on Twitter, we're on Twitch. We're everywhere that you want to be. So, and if you can't monetarily, give us anything, we totally understand that. Just tell your friends. Give us stars on Twitter, or give us stars on iTunes. Give us likes on Twitter. Whatever clicks that you can give us, we are greatly appreciative of it. So until next week, Nate, thank you, and we'll talk to you next time.
Yep, take care.